I spent years obsessing over gear. 100 trips later, I finally realized what actually matters. I started backpacking thinking I would always need to bring a survival knife and that a GPS beacon was overkill. But after over 100 solo backpacking trips across mountains, deserts, and snowfields, I realized my whole system was wrong. Trip by trip, I stripped away the dead weight literally and mentally. This isn't another gear list, it's the 5 mindset shifts that made backpacking lighter, safer, and a lot more fun. And if this helps you rethink your own kit, consider subscribing. I've got more lessons from the trail coming every week. All right, number 1. Back when I first got into backpacking, I figured that I needed to carry some kind of blade. So I brought a full multi-tool. Then eventually I upgraded, if that's the right word, to a simple fixed blade bushcraft knife from Mora Knife. And if I'm doing a trip where I may need to process firewood or just want to do some bushcraft for fun, I'll still bring it on certain trips. But on most of my regular backpacking trips, it just didn't see enough use to justify the weight. I found myself primarily using it to slice open some food packaging or maybe cut a few strips of Gorilla Tape. After that, it'd ride my pack for the next 30 miles. And eventually I realized I wasn't out there to carve spoons or split logs. I was moving through terrain, managing energy, and trying to simplify without sacrificing what I needed. So I switched out the bushcraft knife for a tiny folding razor blade from Dermasafe, and I'll link the exact blade below. It's super compact, barely weighs a thing, and still handles every real-world cutting task that I typically need on the kind of trips that I do. Though if you're planning to process wood, game, or do some serious food prep, a bigger knife might still make sense for you. That folding razor blade comes out surprisingly often during my trips. It's simple, it works, and it disappears into the pack until I need it. And if I'm heading out on a trip where I do want a real knife, whether it's for firewood, carving, or just messing around at camp, I'll bring one. But these days, it's a deliberate choice, not something that I default to out of habit. All right, number 2. When I first got into solo backpacking, I didn't carry a satellite beacon, mostly because I didn't even know they existed. Later, when I did hear about them, I shelved that idea pretty fast. A few $100 plus often an additional subscription on top for something I'd probably never need, it didn't feel urgent. I figured I'd just stay on the trail, have cell signal most of the time, and keep things conservative. And that worked for a while, but only because the conditions never pushed back. Over time, my routes got quieter. I'd spend nights by myself way out in the terrain without any service, deep enough that even a short injury would have left me stuck. A rolled ankle, a snake bite, a fall off a steep ridge, any of those would have been a real problem as a solo backpacker. Now, luckily, I never had a specific close call, but I also couldn't ignore that gap anymore. What I was still considering confidence was starting to feel more like denial. So eventually I caved and shelled out for a Garmin InReach Mini. And I'll link to that and a couple cheaper options below as well. It's a satellite device that can put you in contact with emergency services no matter where you are, even if you don't have cell service. Now I carry it on every trip. Not just for the rescue level emergencies, but to pull weather forecasts, make last minute reroutes, and just keep my trip stress-free. One more layer of preparation that helps me feel ready for whatever the trail throws at me. All right, number 3. On my first few trips, getting my feet wet felt like I'd messed something up. Every creek crossing turned into like a mini project. 10, sometimes 15 minutes spent hunting for the perfect rock crossings to get over dry, wandering upstream for an easier spot, doing anything I can to keep my socks dry. And if there wasn't a dry way across a water barrier, I'd stage a whole production, taking the shoes off, taking the socks off, tiptoeing through, drying my feet, lacing everything back up, and putting the pack back on. That routine chopped up the day and stole all the rhythm from my hike. Over time, that little song and dance just started to wear on me. I watch other hikers just stroll right through the water and keep moving, and eventually I started allowing my shoes to get wet during water crossings as well. I wanted to see how much impact would it have if my shoes and socks just did get wet. And once they were wet, the stress of keeping them dry disappeared. And that eventually became my default. Today, I'll walk through almost anything. Summer creeks, shallow rivers, even icy snowmelt where my feet might go numb for a little bit. Because I wear wool socks from Darn Tough, my feet stay warm even when they're wet, and I trust my system to recover. That said, this is my own comfort zone after years of experience, and it's not a blanket recommendation. In colder temps, think very carefully about hypothermia risk and your foot health before trying the same approach. And a lot of people would probably hate this style of hiking, and they're not wrong. But for me, wading through water as kind of my default has become its own kind of freedom. Once I stopped guarding every step, water crossings turned from a chore into a small but cold moment of fun. But my biggest shift wasn't about water. It was about something I used to think only serious hikers carried. All right, number 4. On my first backpacking trip, I did not bring trekking poles. I figured I didn't need them. They seemed like something you'd only carry if your knees were already shot or if you were trying to look serious about gear. But by the end of that first trip, my knees were pretty trashed. The steep descents hit harder than I expected, and it became pretty obvious that I was missing a key piece of support. So I picked up a pair of Black Diamond Trail Cork trekking poles. Link below if you want the exact model I use. Total lifesaver. I had better balance, more stability on uneven ground, and way more confidence moving through tricky or overgrown sections. But eventually, something started to bug me. Anytime I stopped to check my phone, grab a snack, take a photo, I had to juggle those 2 trekking poles, and I was always leaning one against a rock, a tree, my chest, and inevitably one would always end up falling on the ground. So now I have to bend all the way over with my 30-pound pack on and pick up my drop trekking pole. And that started to become a bit of an annoyance. So I decided to experiment on a trip, and I left one pole at home. And right away, the hiking felt smoother. I still had the support of my single trekking pole when I needed it, especially on the climbs and the descents, but I also had a free hand. I could check my phone, grab snacks from my hip belt, wipe my face with a bandana, and all without worrying about dropping that trekking pole. And these days, I now bring one trekking pole on almost every trip. That works for my style, but plenty of hikers still swear by bringing 2, and it's just about what feels right for your own body. And if the route I'm doing has huge elevation swings, like my hike to the base of the Grand Canyon or the Rockwall Trail in Canada, I'll still pack 2 trekking poles. But when I can, one pole has become my default. All right, this last change, it has completely rewired how I think about camp. Number 5, when I started backpacking, my campsite selection was all about convenience. Flat ground, near water, usually a reserved campsite where I knew exactly where I'd be sleeping. I wasn't really looking for anything special. I just wanted to get set up without any hassle. And early on, that was the right call. I didn't have the experience to troubleshoot a sloped or rocky site or carry water up to the top of a dry ridge. I wanted simple and safe, and that helped me focus on the trip and my hiking. But the more trips I took, the more I started noticing the pull of spots that weren't on the map. Those far off places with no obvious sights, no foot traffic, and way more atmosphere. So once I started exploring areas with dispersed camping, I became hooked. I'd find myself camping up on ledges tucked just below the tree line or way high up where I could see the entire basin below. Now, they weren't always easy. Sometimes I'd have to carry water way further or take a little extra time to find a workable patch of ground, but most of them were more memorable than the pre-established sites I was used to. Just remember to follow leave no trace principles while off trail. Now, I plan for those kind of nights. I'll scour topographic maps and mark potential areas in advance, making sure I'm carrying enough water and keep a few backup areas in mind if my first choice doesn't pan out. Now, if you're newer, staying near water sources and sticking with obvious campsites is still a smart move. But once your system can handle more variables, those off-grid camps can turn an ordinary route into something you totally remember. And none of these changes in my backpacking approach happened all at once. They built slowly, one trip, one annoyance, one "why am I still carrying this?" moment at a time. And that's part of the joy of backpacking. I'm always learning something and refining my system on every trip. That process never really stops, and that's what keeps it interesting. And if you want to skip a few seasons of friction, check out this next video on what I'd do differently if I was starting over with all of my backpacking gear. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Keep dialing in your own system, and I'll see you out there.